Have you ever wondered what it would be like to simply vanish? To walk out your door one sunny afternoon and dissolve into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a chilling silence and a question mark that hangs over decades. This isn't the opening of a fictional thriller. It is the stark reality of what happened to one of the most powerful and feared men in 20th century America. A man who commanded armies of workers, who could bring the nation's economy to a standstill with a single phone call, and who danced with devils in the pale moonlight. This is the story of James Riddle Hoffa, and the question that still echoes through the dark corridors of American history: did he truly just disappear? The day was July 30, 1975, a sweltering summer afternoon in Bloomfield Township, a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. Jimmy Hoffa, the formidable former president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Union, was a man accustomed to getting his way. Punctual and impatient, he arrived at the Match's Red Fox restaurant for a 2:00 p.m. meeting. The restaurant was a familiar place. It had been the venue for his own son's wedding reception. But the men he was scheduled to meet, two powerful and dangerous figures from the world of organized crime, were nowhere to be seen. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an hour, and Hoffa's notorious temper began to fray. His lunch appointment was with two men he knew well, perhaps too well: Anthony "Tony Jack" Giacalone, a respected and feared captain in the Detroit Mafia, and Anthony "Tony Provenzano, a Teamsters official from New Jersey with deep ties to the Genovese crime family. This wasn't a social call. Hoffa, recently released from prison after a conviction for jury tampering and fraud, was desperately clawing his way back to power within the Union he once ruled with an iron fist. He needed the support of men like Giacalone and Provenzano, men who operated in the murky underworld where union politics and mob business were indistinguishable. As the afternoon sun beat down on the restaurant's parking lot, Hoffa's frustration grew. He made a series of phone calls, first to his wife, Josephine, complaining about being stood up. He assured her he would be home by 4:00 p.m. to grill steaks for dinner. He then called a close associate, Louis Linto, again venting his anger at the no-show. Witnesses saw him pacing impatiently by his car, a man of immense power reduced to waiting under the Michigan sun. Two men even stopped to shake his hand, recognizing the famous union boss, oblivious to the fact they were among the last to see him alive. Sometime between 2:45 and 2:50 p.m. the waiting ended. According to a single, crucial witness, Hoffa was seen getting into the back of a maroon Mercury Marquis. He wasn't alone. 3 other individuals were in the car with him. There was no struggle, no sign of coercion. Hoffa, a man who had faced down corporate giants and government prosecutors, seemingly went willingly. The car pulled out of the Match's Red Fox parking lot and drove off, carrying Jimmy Hoffa away from his life, his family, and his empire, and into the realm of legend. He was never seen again. The initial hours of his absence were filled with a quiet, gnawing anxiety. When 4:00 p.m. came and went with no sign of Hoffa, his wife Josephine began to worry. Her husband was a man of habit, a man who kept his word. As evening fell, the anxiety turned to dread. The next morning, with Hoffa still missing, the family's worst fears began to crystallize. At 7:20 a.m., Louis Linto went to the Match's Red Fox and found Hoffa's green Pontiac Grand Ville, unlocked, in the parking lot where he had left it. There was no trace of him. A missing person report was filed, and a massive investigation was launched, one that would become one of the most extensive and frustrating in FBI history. The mystery of Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance immediately captivated the nation. He was a household name, a polarizing figure who was seen as a hero by the working class and a villain by law enforcement. He had built the Teamsters into the largest and most powerful union in the United States, but his tenure was marred by accusations of corruption and deep ties to organized crime. His public feud with Robert F. Kennedy was legendary. Now, this larger-than-life character had vanished, seemingly swallowed whole by the very forces he had courted for so long. The question wasn't just what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, but who would dare to make him disappear. The investigation immediately focused on the men Hoffa was supposed to meet. Both Anthony Giacalone and Anthony Provenzano had ironclad alibis. They denied ever having scheduled a meeting with Hoffa and were nowhere near the restaurant that afternoon. Provenzano, in particular, had a strong motive. Once a close ally, their relationship had soured dramatically during a shared prison sentence in the 1960s. Hoffa's attempt to regain the Teamsters presidency was a direct threat to the mob's lucrative control over the union's massive pension fund, a control that Provenzano helped maintain. A key figure who quickly emerged was Charles "Chucky" O'Brien, a man Hoffa had raised like a son. O'Brien had a complicated, almost filial relationship with Hoffa, having lived with his family for a time. He was also a Teamster and had connections to the individuals Hoffa was supposed to meet. The maroon Mercury Marquis that Hoffa was last seen in belonged to the son of Anthony Giacalone, and O'Brien admitted to having borrowed it that day. However, he vehemently denied seeing Hoffa, claiming he had spent the afternoon running errands, including delivering a large frozen salmon. His story was flimsy and uncorroborated, but investigators could never definitively place him at the scene of the abduction. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into years, the investigation became a labyrinth of dead ends and false leads. The FBI chased down thousands of tips, conducted hundreds of interviews, and utilized extensive surveillance, but the wall of silence from the underworld was impenetrable. The case became a national obsession, a modern American folktale whispered in diners and bars across the country. Theories about Hoffa's final resting place became a grim parlor game. Was he buried under the end zone of Giants Stadium in New Jersey? Was his body crushed in a car compactor, shipped to Japan as scrap metal? Or was he interred in the concrete foundations of a Detroit freeway? The list of potential suspects read like a who's who of the American Mafia. Beyond Provenzano and Giacalone, names like Russell Bufalino, the quiet and immensely powerful boss of the Pennsylvania crime family, were whispered in connection with the disappearance. Bufalino was a man of immense influence, a key figure on the National Mafia Commission, and a close associate of many high-ranking Teamsters. It was Bufalino who had first introduced Hoffa to one of his most trusted associates, a man who would later claim to hold the final, bloody answer to the mystery. That man was Frank, the Irishman Sheeran, a towering, physically imposing union official from Delaware with a reputation as a reliable and ruthless mob enforcer. Sheeran was a close friend and confidant to both Hoffa and Bufalino, placing him in the precarious position of straddling a widening, deadly chasm between the two powerful men. For years, he remained a peripheral figure in the investigation, just one of many names in the voluminous FBI files. But decades later, as his own life drew to a close, Sheeran would step out of the shadows and into the center of the storm. The investigation sputtered along for years, a cold case that refused to die. The FBI conducted numerous digs and searches based on informant tips, turning up nothing. They excavated a horse farm, drilled through the concrete floor of a suburban shed, and even searched under a swimming pool, all to no avail. The mystery of Hoffa's fate seemed destined to remain unsolved, a testament to the Mafia's ability to silence its enemies and erase its crimes. The world moved on, but the question of what happened on that July afternoon in 1975 lingered, a ghost haunting the American consciousness. For nearly 3 decades, the case remained frozen in time, a collection of unproven theories and whispered rumors. Then in 2004, a book was published that sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community and the public alike. I Heard You Paint Houses, written by Charles Brandt, was based on a series of deathbed confessions from none other than Frank Sheeran. The title itself was mob slang for contract killing, the paint being the blood splattered on the walls. In the book, Sheeran claimed that he, acting on the orders of Russell Bufalino, was the man who pulled the trigger and ended Jimmy Hoffa's life. Sheeran's account was chillingly detailed. He claimed that he was part of the crew that picked up Hoffa from the mattress Red Fox. He said that Hoffa, seeing his trusted friend Sheeran in the car, got in without suspicion. They drove to a nearby house in Detroit where, according to Sheeran, Hoffa walked in ahead of him, expecting a meeting. Instead, Sheeran raised a pistol and shot his friend twice in the back of the head. It was a swift, brutal betrayal, the culmination of a power struggle that had been simmering for years. Sheeran claimed Hoffa's body was then taken to a crematorium and incinerated, leaving no trace. This confession was the breakthrough the world had been waiting for, yet it was met with a healthy dose of skepticism. Was a dying man telling the truth, or was he trying to immortalize himself with a sensational, unverifiable story? The FBI had long considered Sheeran a person of interest, and he was known to be in Detroit at the time of the disappearance. However, there was no physical evidence to corroborate his story. An examination of the house where Sheeran claimed the murder took place revealed bloodstains, but DNA testing proved it was not Hoffa's blood. The debate over Sheeran's confession rages to this day. Many former FBI agents and prosecutors who worked on the case dismiss his claims as a fabrication. They point to other credible suspects, like Salvatore Sally Bugs Brigaglio, a ruthless enforcer for Tony Provenzano, who was considered a primary suspect by the FBI for years. Others who knew Sheeran have also cast doubt on his story, describing him as a heavy drinker prone to exaggeration. Yet the level of detail in his confession and his close relationships with all the key players make it a difficult story to completely disregard. The immediate aftermath of Hoffa's disappearance saw a power vacuum within the Teamsters, which was quickly filled by figures more amenable to the Mafia's interests. The union, already plagued by corruption, descended further into the grip of organized crime. While no one was ever convicted for Hoffa's murder, the investigation did lead to increased scrutiny on the Mafia's control over labor unions. Several key suspects, including Tony Provenzano and Tony Giacalone, were eventually imprisoned on unrelated charges, their criminal empires weakened by the intense federal pressure that the Hoffa case brought to bear. Tony Provenzano, the man who held a deep-seated grudge against Hoffa, was convicted of another murder and died in prison in 1988. He never spoke a word about his role in the disappearance. Anthony Giacalone, the Detroit mob captain, was convicted of tax evasion and also died before any charges related to Hoffa could be brought. Russell Bufalino, the quiet don who allegedly gave the order, was convicted of extortion and also died behind bars, taking his secrets with him to the grave. The code of silence, the Mafia's most sacred vow, held firm. For the Hoffa family, the disappearance was a wound that never healed. They spent years holding out hope for his return, eventually offering a substantial reward for any information. In 1982, 7 years after he was last seen, Jimmy Hoffa was declared legally dead. His son, James P. Hoffa, would later follow in his father's footsteps, becoming the president of the Teamsters in the late 1990s and working to clean up the union's tarnished image. The shadow of his father's mysterious end, however, would forever loom over his tenure. The legacy of Jimmy Hoffa is a complex tapestry of contradictions. He was a champion of the working man who secured better wages and working conditions for millions. Yet he was also a corrupt leader who allowed his powerful union to be used as a personal bank for the mob. He was a charismatic and beloved figure to his supporters, and a ruthless, intimidating force to his enemies. His life was a testament to the corrupting influence of absolute power and the dangerous alliances that can be forged in the pursuit of it. The Match's Red Fox restaurant, the place where Hoffa's known world came to an end, became an unlikely tourist attraction, a landmark of true crime history. People would come to sit in the parking lot, to gaze at the spot where a giant of American history simply ceased to be. The restaurant eventually changed its name and ownership, but the ghost of that July afternoon in 1975 could never be fully exorcised. It stands as a silent monument to an unsolved mystery, a place where the veil between the ordinary world and the shadowy underworld was briefly and violently torn away. Frank Sheeran's confession, whether true or not, has become the most widely accepted version of events, immortalized in books and films. It provides a neat, if brutal, conclusion to a story that for so long had no ending. It speaks to our need for closure, for a definitive answer to a question that has haunted us for decades. It paints a picture of a world where loyalty is a commodity, and friendship can be extinguished with 2 bullets to the back of the head. But without concrete proof, it remains just that, a story. The FBI officially considers the case to be open, though it is largely inactive. Every few years, a new tip will surface, a new potential burial site will be identified, and the media frenzy will begin anew. Shovels and backhoes will once again break the earth, searching for something, anything, that could finally bring the case to a close. But each search has ended in the same way, with nothing but dirt and disappointment. The ground has held its secrets tightly. The disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa is more than just a missing person case. It is a chilling piece of American mythology. It represents a time when organized crime wielded immense power, infiltrating legitimate institutions and operating with a terrifying degree of impunity. It serves as a stark reminder that even the most powerful individuals are not invincible, and that there are forces in the world capable of making anyone disappear. His story is a cautionary tale about the darkness that can lie beneath the surface of power and ambition. The power that Hoffa wielded was immense, transforming the Teamsters into a political and economic force. He negotiated the first national freight agreement, standardizing pay and conditions for truckers across the country. This achievement alone cemented his legacy as a titan of the labor movement. Yet this power was built on a foundation that was deeply compromised. The union's vast pension fund became a slush fund for mob-backed projects, a river of cash that flowed into the coffers of organized crime families across the nation. The animosity between Hoffa and Tony Provenzano was personal and deeply felt. Their feud, which reportedly began over a dispute in the Lewisburg federal prison, was a clash of 2 massive egos. Provenzano reportedly made threats against Hoffa and his family, a clear sign that their relationship had devolved into something toxic and dangerous. When Hoffa sought Provenzano's support for his comeback, he was not just asking for a political alliance. He was stepping into a minefield of old grievances and simmering hatred. The role of Russell, the quiet Don Bufalino, cannot be overstated. He was a master puppeteer, a man who preferred to operate from the shadows, his influence extending far beyond his small Pennsylvania territory. His connection to Hoffa was both a source of strength and a potential liability. When Hoffa's bid to retake the Teamsters threatened the delicate balance of power and the lucrative flow of money, Bufalino was in a position to make a final, decisive move. If Sheeran's story is to be believed, Bufalino was the judge, jury, and through his hitman, the executioner. The endless search for Hoffa's body has become a grim, almost ritualistic, part of the saga. From the wetlands of Florida to the scrap yards of New Jersey, the theories have been as numerous as they are gruesome. Each new dig represents a flicker of hope that the mystery can finally be put to rest, that a family can finally have a place to mourn. But the absence of a body has allowed the mystery to grow, to fester, to become something larger than the man himself. So we are left where we began, with a question that hangs in the air like smoke. Did Jimmy Hoffa truly vanish without a trace? The evidence, the confessions, and the decades of investigation all point to a grim, violent end. He was almost certainly the victim of a mob hit, a man silenced because he knew too much and wanted to reclaim a throne that was no longer his. He did not vanish into thin air. He was deliberately and efficiently erased from existence by the very criminal underworld he had embraced. But in another, more profound sense, Jimmy Hoffa has never disappeared. His story is etched into the American psyche. He lives on in the countless books, documentaries, and films that have attempted to unravel the mystery of his fate. He is a symbol of a bygone era, a ghost that haunts the crossroads of labor, politics, and organized crime. The search for his body may be futile, but the search for the meaning of his life and death continues. And perhaps the most chilling part of this story is not that a powerful man could be made to disappear, but that the truth of what happened to him could be so effectively and permanently buried. The silence that surrounds his final moments is the most terrifying legacy of all.